Welcome everyone to Always on CXCX, the show for contact center and IT leaders. Between helping support your contact center reps, your customers, and the tech that makes your contact center function, you're relied upon quite a lot. Can't afford for your customer experience, agent experience, or stability of the contact center to falter. So, in this show, we talk through how you can continuously improve your customer experience, your employee experience, and everything in between. If you're ready to find the next strategy to keep your customer and employee experience always on, let's get into this episode. All right, so today we have Jon Zoltie, a contact center subject matter expert here at AudioCodes, joining us again to detail what it takes to get your employee and customer experience right, specifically focused on the user experience for agents and supervisors and how that then powers the customer experience. So let's jump into the conversation. Jon, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me again. Good to see you again.
Yeah. Yeah, good to see you as well. So we had a conversation just a couple weeks back specific on user experience, especially when it comes to the user interface inside of contact centers. And you made a really good point about how there's a couple different people that we need to think about within the user experience. And the first one you mentioned is within the creation of the IVR. So let's just jump into the conversation. First topic I wanted to cover with you is who is the most often user that is left out of the IVR design?
Yeah, so I think the conversation was that it wasn't sort of always necessarily that someone was left out. It was just what are the knock-on effects for everyone and who is actually involved. When you're thinking of the IVR and the IVR design, you think of a customer experience, and the IVR is built around the customer. And that's obviously fine and the right thing to do. But sometimes it's the agent and the knock-on effect of the agent where you see some other benefits as well. So yes, the IVR is rightly designed to improve the customer journey, but ensuring the right call goes to the right person with the right skill to answer that call is probably pretty evident. It means the first time resolution of the call is going to be a lot higher. But the knock-on effect that we were discussing was that the agent who picks up the phone knows why someone is calling if the IVR is done correctly. That means that they aren't necessarily transferring a call to someone else constantly or having to deal with irate customers who get through to the wrong department. And that's kind of the knock-on effect that I was talking about. So it's hard to recruit agents nowadays. It's hard to retain them. And if you can improve the customer journey, you improve the agent experience. So suddenly you're adding value to the conversation as a contact center agent. You get better job satisfaction. You're actually helping people rather than dealing with frustrated customers and simply just acting as a call transfer agent all day. So I think our discussion was just around, well, who's building the IVR and who are they thinking about? And the answer was, well, actually, if you have agents involved in designing that IVR, they're best placed to know, well, what's a good customer journey look like? What annoys customers when they get through? What does good look like? What does a good call come through as? And that was just an important part of engaging with agents when you're designing the IVR to get a better flow and a better customer experience by utilizing those people. So it's kind of the answer's all round with, yes, the agents are sometimes forgotten. One, in terms of actually designing it, they should be involved in it. But also there is a knock-on effect that a good IVR impacts the agent as well as the user.
Yeah. Who do you see is normally the person who's creating the IVR?
It varies, and I think that's sometimes the issue. Sometimes it can be an IT manager, sometimes it can be operations, sometimes it could just be a supervisor within the contact center. Ideally, to some degree, all of the above, I think would be the ideal answer, but sometimes it varies, and I think that's sometimes why you end up with good IVRs and bad IVRs, maybe.
Yeah. I guess from a tactical standpoint, what would it look like for an agent and maybe a contact center manager or supervisor to sit down and create the IVR? What do you think the flow of that would be like on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis? What suggestions do you maybe have there?
Uh, It's a good question. I think that it's multifaceted. It's probably it could take quite a while to sit down and go through what does perfect look like in an IVR. But the decision is sometimes just around, well, how quickly can we get people through the IVR? No one wants to sit in an IVR for ages and press numerous options. Yeah. So we talked in our last episode, I think, around conversational IVR and putting in conversational IVR. It means you can have what we call a one-hit interaction. You could say one word, for example, not even natural language. You could say a single word and get through to the right skill every time. So it's identifying how many different words could people say and where do those calls go and how quickly can we get that to the right queue and the right agent with the right skill is probably the key. And that goes back to your previous point, the bit I just talked about, which is how many different words and what are people thinking about and what are they going to say in the IVR. And again, it's kind of an agent that's actually quite well placed to know that. They're the ones taking the calls and actually dealing with the customers and hearing what they're calling about. So I think some of those and coming up with keywords is really simple place to start with a supervisor and an agent to sit down and talk through what are those keywords that people are calling around.
Yep. So it's always keeping in mind the people who are speaking to the customers on a regular basis, making sure they're involved in the conversation, exactly. Having a regular kind of, maybe it's just a regular sync meeting with a manager or supervisor to go over, hey, these are the keywords and things that people are calling about more often. And this is what their main concern is. Similar to maybe I'm thinking about from other departments in the organization, say someone who's maybe in a sales role, who's speaking to prospects and customers all day long and having them meet regularly with someone maybe on the product team or services team to help get an idea of what is the main pain point, what is the main concerns from our customers, and help that to guide where the product is then developed in the future. So similar to how then the IVR is designed in the future.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And using, there's reports in the systems that show what are people asking for, and utilizing those on a regular basis and finding out when people are saying a keyword and it's not actually going through to the right agent or going through to no agent because it's not matching. How often are we having that? And therefore, if we're getting a lot of people saying that specific word in the IVR, we should create a queue or a skill based around it so that they're not going into generic queues. So yes, anecdotally speaking to agents and then using the reports on a little bit more of an objective basis to identify what are they saying and what do we need to do.
Awesome. Really good. I want to stick on this topic of kind of around contact center design and agent experience. What's an example of a great user experience or design related to agents handling customer interactions?
So for me, I'd say that this probably comes down to two key points, and that would be simplicity and choice. So it's very difficult to recruit customer service agents. It's also expensive and time consuming because you need to train them. So if you can design a user experience that's very simple to use, it's going to save a lot of time on training. As a key example, if you can use the same technology stack across as much of the business as possible, then it's going to save time as well. And again, key example of that would be something like Microsoft Teams. If you're using that as your entire ecosystem, everyone lives and breathes Microsoft and Microsoft Teams within the organization, using Teams or a Teams integrated contact center, for example, is going to make that journey and that training a lot better. In a similar vein, having all the information displayed to an agent like CRM, for example, CRM information on that desktop interface when they're handling a call is really important for some agents. And that's where the second part comes in, which is choice. So some agents want a single pane of glass. Everything must be in the same interface. It must be within Teams, for example. Whereas you then have some other agents who don't want the single pane of glass. They actually want a separate screen with CRM on it, a separate screen with Teams on it, the contact center software in the middle, and something else on a different part of the screen. So they typically want the real estate of seeing everything bigger on one place. So combining both, I think, is probably the key of a good design for an agent interface, which is have it all in one interface if you want. However, the ability to break them open into different pieces as well is equally important, because it's just user choice at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone works differently. So I
Yeah,
know for myself, I have a couple monitors. I like to have things spread across. It helps me see everything. I'm not clicking between tabs, but say if you're someone who has one monitor or one screen, having it on one place where you're not clicking between multiple tabs on one monitor, which can then be, become difficult to find something. But
and, there's age bits or there's age related stuff in there as well. You're lucky enough to be young enough, I guess, that you could have smaller items on your screen. I, for example, have to have the real estate on mine because I can't see anything particularly small. So it's as you point out, just everyone has a different view on it, and it's trying to cover everyone is probably the key.
Yeah, cool. I love that. All right, let's switch to, all right, so we talked about agents and the agent interface and what's helpful for them from a contact center design standpoint. What about for the others in the contact center, the supervisors?
I'd say it's the same story as the agent interface. So personally, I think a supervisor interface should be the same as an agent's, but with extra functionality. So being able to very quickly see what's going on in the contact center, or at least specific assigned skills or queues that I'm as a supervisor looking after, and a dashboard or a wallboard to see what's going on. At the same time, in the same interface, being able to handle calls if I want to. There's still a lot of supervisors that still handle calls, especially even if they don't do it all day, every day. They handle those calls when times are busy, for example. So they throw themselves into a queue and just take some of those excess calls. So having the ability to take calls and see all of that information in the same interface is key, without having to break open another different application, for example. So that's kind of the front end piece. I'd say the other bit to be cognizant of on the supervisor experience is probably on the admin side, so a little bit on the back end and the administration. So again, making it really easy, and self-service is probably the key. So in the past, and I think we talked about it last time, didn't we, where you used to have IT people were the only ones that could change something in an IVR, and changing opening hours on a Monday, for example, because it was bank holiday, was someone that was in IT or someone technically trained as an engineer to actually write code to change the IVR, the opening hours for Monday. So giving supervisors the ability to make changes like those, opening hours, throwing agents into or out of queues, changing or adding skills, and that sort of streamlining of those efficiencies, I think, is really key. So giving them self-serve capability that a supervisor can make those changes without having to go to IT is a really key one. That knock-on effect, again, is that IT people can then concentrate on fixing other major issues rather than having tasks about changing opening hours in the IVR and out-of-hours call flows, for example. Mm-hmm. And then I think just to make sure that is done correctly as well, probably having to put in guardrails alongside that supervisor functionality. So having granular access management. There's some organizations where they may want their supervisors to change those opening hours or create or amend agents or skills. At the same time, they don't want those same supervisors making changes to the core IVR and making some changes that could be quite damaging to the IVR. So allowing that granular access and granular restrictions as well is probably quite key for a well-designed supervisor experience.
Mm-hmm. What about, I wanted to ask if you could talk to that granular experience related to having multiple sites or multiple tenants for a contact center. How does that play into the supervisor experience? Like, should it be one supervisor overseeing all the tenants, or could it be set up in a way that there's multiple supervisors, each for a specific site? Could you talk to that a little bit?
I suppose the answer is everything you've just said, I suppose,
Okay.
all of those options. So yeah, we do have customers. I think one of the key ones is a large university have multiple different tenants. have multiple different domains. It might be an on-site hospital, it might be an on-site police department, probably has a different email address and a different domain, probably a different tenant with Microsoft potentially, for example. And again, it might be that you want different leveled access for all of those users. So one supervisor may be able to see the hospital and the police and have management over that tenant and those users and those agents, but has no visibility or no control over the other tenants. And then you might want a super user or a super admin, whatever people tend to call them, who have global access to the entirety of those tenants and want access to the the whole lot and can manage and edit those as well. So again, I think the point is being able to have granular access, from top level all the way down, and restricting that is probably the ideal answer.
Yeah. So control to specific users is what it sounds like can lead to a great experience for the supervisors in this standpoint from a design.
Yeah, it empowers them to be able to make the changes. And again, the knock-on effect, as I mentioned, is it frees up time of other people having to make those changes. And IT, like you just said, in a multi-tenant and a multi-customer and multi-domain customer environment, making those changes there could be a lot of changes to be made. And having to put in requests to IT for one person to be able to write scripts to change all of that is then going to take away the use of an IT person that could be better spent doing other things. So there's kind of a whole slew of knock-on effects that actually that gives benefit to.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about the agent and the supervisor now. All right, now let's get on to what is we think the customer experience. And I know the reason we started this conversation focusing on agents and supervisors is their experience often flows into what the customer experience is. So could you talk a little bit more about the customer experience side of things from design of the contact center?
Yeah, so I think, you've rightly just pointed out, I guess. So everything we've kind of discussed, I think, flows back and forth. So what I mean by that is if I'm an agent and my life is made easier, I can handle a call more efficiently. It's going to make my job easier, and it therefore is going to have an impact on the end customer and the customer experience. So if you think of the example of how many times you've called a contact center and you get through to an agent and they say, can you hang on for a minute while I bring your account up? And you're kind of thinking, well, why should it take you a minute to bring my account up? You already have my telephone number. I've already entered some digits into the IVR. Why do you not have that info straight in front of you? So immediately your experience is kind of reduced as a customer. That customer journey is already making a bit of an impact on you, thinking, well, this is taking longer than it needs to. So having an agent with access to CRM information at their fingertips is powerful, displaying it onto the screen so they can see that very quickly and not have to say, can you give me a minute to bring up your details? But where it can really have a really, I suppose, powerful experience is if you're using things like conversational IVR that we talked about earlier, allowing that caller to say why they're calling and displaying what was actually said in the IVR to the agent can be really, really powerful. The example that I'd probably typically give is it might be you calling in to the contact center and you speak to me and I say, thanks for calling, but can I bring your account details up? Just give me a minute. At this point, you're already slightly frustrated. I then say, why are you calling? Then you kind of go, well, I've already put that into the IVR because I already pressed option 4, which is to track my delivery, for example. And that experience already is kind of just a bit jarring for both involved, because you're getting slightly frustrated. The agent's feeling the ire of you calling in. You compare that to, for example, you using conversational IVR and you're calling in and it says, in a few words, tell me why you're calling. You say, I want to track my delivery. Great. What's your delivery number? Here's your delivery number. I'll also now pass you through to an agent. Now, in my interface, I can see exactly what you've just said in the IVR. Your details are popped up, and automatically my answer can be, hi, Josh. I can see you're calling about your delivery and the delivery date. it looks like it's being delivered tomorrow. Is there anything else I can help you with? That's a much more powerful experience for you as a caller than that first example I gave. And typically that means, again, first time resolution and being on the phone quick, or having a quicker experience, is you go, do you know what? You've kind of answered the question. Great. If it hasn't arrived by Friday, please call us back and I can look into it. But it looks like it's going to be delivered tomorrow. Anything else I can help with? Great. No. Have a great day. That's a completely different contrast to that first experience that I mentioned that really annoys people when they have to re-authenticate, re-give your name, why you're calling, and so on. So that's one example. I think, and even just going back to basics that we've already talked about, so going back to the IVR and skills-based routing, getting through to the right agent is vital for both parties. So again, we go back to, it's designed for the customer experience, but actually, if you don't get that bit right and you're sending calls through to the wrong agent or the wrong queue, I don't think anyone can blame an agent for not having empathy or particularly great tone or being enthusiastic when they've received 50 calls today of, I'm sorry, you've come through to the wrong department, let me just transfer you. First call of the day, maybe more enthusiastic. By the 50th, you're probably a bit annoyed. Yeah. And that's going to get felt by the customer as you kind of sigh and go, yeah, look, wrong department, let me put you through. So even just that basic IVR of getting the right calls to the right skills, to the right queues and through to the right agent has a knock-on effect to kind of the agent and then back and forth, as I said at the start, to the customer experience as well. So it's kind of a two-way, almost like I think the phrase is what's good for the goose is good for the gander, as they say. But I suppose summary is, yeah, an agent, a supervisor, and a customer experience, they're all intrinsically linked and they all have a knock-on effect sort of back and forth to each other in terms of the experience of everyone involved.
Mm-hmm. That's really good, John. Could you talk to, I know we talked a lot about voice and IVRs. What about from an email perspective or a web chat perspective of interactions? What might that look like for, maybe we can talk about the agent and supervisor a little bit, as well as how then that plays into the customer experience.
They probably have a similar effect, I guess. So again, when you're getting in emails, the equivalent of transferring a call is forwarding an email. So when you're talking about getting emails into a contact center and having agents dealing with emails, you need to make sure the email hits the right queue, because straight away, if it's hit the wrong queue, email gets forwarded. And it's almost sometimes like your SLA, your service level agreement, could start again. So if we're going to handle calls within 24 hours, but I receive an email, I receive an email, I forward it to a different department, that 24-hour clock starts again. So you may not get an answer that you want through, in a timely fashion. So it's kind of the equivalent, making sure that emails go to the right queues and the right skills is equally as important as getting voice into those. Same again with web chat. You don't necessarily forward web chat, but making sure when you go to a website and you fill in the right details, that those details match specific queues and skills, and they go through to an agent that can handle that call, giving information and making sure the agent is trained so that, again, if it's going to the wrong queue or the wrong person, they go, I can help, but can you give me 2 or 3 minutes? Again, we've probably all been there as well when you go on live chat and they say, I'll be back in 2 minutes. And you think, why does it need 2 minutes? I'm literally just asking, when's the date of my delivery? Yeah. So similar, I suppose, at the equivalent of just making sure that, again, the same points really, the right cues, the right skills and speed of getting them to the right people.
Probably when it comes to training up agents, do you think that agents should be trained on the specific topic of, say, the customer service interactions that typically come in and topics, or should they be more so trained on the type of channel, like email, web chat, or voice?
I would say every business is going to be different. So I think again, if we go back to how do we design it, and you know, the topic of the conversation or the call today with design user experience is making sure that everyone is covered regardless. So by that, I mean, you may have some organizations where their agents are very capable of handling omni-channel capabilities within seconds of each of those channels. So I can handle a voice call. As soon as I finish with a voice call, I can handle an email, or I can handle web chat and then switch back to a voice call. You then have other organizations where some people are really, really good on the phone, but they're not as good at written language. And the reverse is true as well. Some people are really good at written language, but they don't have a particularly great tone or empathy or whatever it might be on the phone. Mm-hmm. So being able to have voice-enabled agents and or omni-channel agents and the option of being able to blend them is really important. And so when you're designing the UI as well around the agents that we've already discussed, being able to give the agents the ability to flick between those channels seamlessly, making sure it's in the same interface, making sure they can, if they're done with dealing with emails for the day and they don't want to deal any more emails, they can log off the email channel but still stay within the voice channel. I've handled enough voice calls today. I just need to rattle through some emails. Let me just turn off voice, take myself out of the voice queue for 2 hours and just handle emails. Again, really important to design that as well.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That answers the question.
Yeah, no, that was a great point, especially related to the topic today, you know, talking about design and how that fits into the user interface. Jon, wow. Really good. I know it's your second time on here. You crushed it the first time. Really come with some insightful information. I mean, you covered IVR design, a design of the contact center from the agent perspective, from the supervisor perspective, from the customer perspective. So thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us today.
Always a pleasure.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Always on CXEX. If you got one thing you can use to improve your customer employee experience, we'd appreciate if you subscribed and gave a 5-star review. If you're interested in improving your customer experience by using Microsoft Teams as a contact center, consider using Voca for free for 30 days. Just voted the best Microsoft Teams contact center by CX Today. Voca brings to Teams the most critical contact center features for providing great customer service in the main service desk and departments beyond the contact center without the hefty price tags or nice to haves. Just Google AudioCodes Voca or find the link in the show notes. Thank you again for joining us today. We'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.